All right, well, welcome everyone. We are glad that you're here. We're going to talk today briefly. This is going to be like all the sessions, very fast, but hopefully it will prove to be incredibly worthwhile. So we're going to talk about CCRS and close reading today, and specifically unpacking of visual text. This is a repeat session from a support webinar we did back in April, but it became clear during that support webinar that this is a topic that we all want more experience with, more time to practice with, more time to talk about how to help our students unpack visual text. So I am Lindsey, and I am the Atlas Numeracy Coordinator. I also teach at Literacy Minnesota as an ABE instructor. And Kristine, I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Kristine Kelly, and I am at Atlas as well. My title's changed just a bit. It's Literacy Coordinator with the retirement of Marn. I'm still really bummed, double-edged sword with Marn retiring. I miss her. And yeah, so I do a lot of the work with the CCRS and the English language arts, and now STAR and EBRI and those things.
Mm-hmm. So today we're going to do 3 different things. We're going to identify how a close reading routine can unlock meaning of visual texts. You'll have time to collaborate with peers in a breakout room, kind of practicing sequencing certain questions to kind of lead to a summative prompt. And then we will come back from the breakout groups and reflect on that experience and on the concepts and the ideas that we're talking about. So with that, we will get started with a brief activity. So again, this is only 45 minutes, so this is not going to be a very, it's not going to be enough time to do this, but we're going to give you about 4 minutes to just look at this graph and answer some questions. So I'm going to put a link in the chat, and it's going to be a forced copy. So when you click on it, it's going to force you to make a copy. This is to give you a chance to get familiar with this graphic, because you're going to be, you will see this graphic again later in the presentation. So here's the graphic, and then there are some questions. Because this is your own copy, you can type in this. You won't have time to answer all the questions, but you will have time to kind of get a little bit familiar with what is happening. So here is that link. You can all click on that, and we'll take about 4 minutes to just get familiar. Let me know if you have any problems getting the link open. Again, you should all have your own space to write. Okay, you can't open it. Let's see, is anybody else having problems? So, Kristine, is there going to be a certain setting that you wouldn't see the make a copy button?
Says it's just, oh, it's slow to load.
Oh.
I'm not sure. Let me check it out.
Okay.
Carla?
Yes.
I'm going to send you a message here. Somebody has a question about getting to another session. So.
You had to log into your Google account to access. Interesting. If you are having trouble, we will, so some people are getting in, some people are not. For sake of time, we are not going to be using these questions throughout the session. So if you don't get to answer these specific questions, that is okay. They were created in effort to kind of digest and understand what this graphic is. So if you cannot get in, if you want to just stay on Zoom and look at my screen at the graphic that I have up, that is okay as well. And yes, I will post this link again.
And the purpose of this really is just to look at the types of questions that we may commonly ask or see related to visuals.
Mm-hmm.
What to do is we're going to talk a little bit about a way to create and sequence questions. For text-dependent questions, the sequencing is a really big part.
Taken 1 or 2 more minutes.
I'm sorry,
Oh, okay, Mary Jo.
Mary.
Oh, that's too bad.
I'd give it 1 more minute.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Yes, we often direct students, what's the title, which is important, right? Look at this graph. What do you see? The overall trend. Asking some specific questions about percent decrease. Which city experienced the greatest percent decrease? So some questions to comprehend and pay attention to what's happening in the graph. What can you infer might be the future of bus ridership in these 4 cities?
Mm-hmm.
So we will see this graph again. We just wanted to give you a little bit of time to sit and look at it and consider these questions that we commonly ask students. Oh, look at that, right on time. So if you come back to Zoom, if you are in your own document, again, I know that's not enough time to answer all the questions. It's a little teaser. If you come back to Zoom, you will see section 2. We're going to talk about, or Kristine's going to talk about layers of close reading. And so you will see that graph again, but she's going to take some time to explain some different layers of close reading, and then we'll utilize that with that graph.
Yeah, so if you've done any ELA training with me or done any of the CCRS foundations online, we talk about the text, reading a text, and text, we mean anything a student can read. So it could be a print text, it could be a visual text, it could be an audio text, it could be anything that a student could examine closely and get meaning from. And we separate questions that we want to ask during a close read, a deep dive, into 3 layers. And the first layer is, what does the text say? So these questions tend to be about key details and the main idea, or asking about the theme, and potentially doing things like sequencing details or sequencing events or sequencing the plot. The next level is, how does the text work? So we're talking about craft and structure, and these actually hit reading standards that anchors 4, 5, and 6. So it's vocabulary, text structure, and point of view, purpose, that kind of thing. And so these are where we ask students to look at how the text works. So this might be looking at text features. This might be looking at really digging down into some of the vocabulary and asking students to use some of their word study knowledge. It may be asking them to locate certain things or to talk about how the text is organized. And then finally, what does the text mean? So this is where students are integrating ideas and knowledge. So here is where we'll ask about, we'll dive a little deeper into visuals and have students integrate visuals with text, asking such questions as, what information was in the picture or on the chart that wasn't in the text? How are the text in the chart or the text in the graph similar? How are they different? Why did the writer decide or the creator to present the visual this way? What does the writer think? And what kind of any claims or arguments? And then finally, comparing texts. So again, I love to bring in visuals all the time. So virtually every text that I have my students read, I bring in a visual, I bring in a photo, I bring in some kind of a graphic, a chart, some kind of graph or something, because that's actually comparing texts, which is a very important standard. You don't have to have two big print texts to compare to do Reading Anchor 9. You can have them look at a short text and a visual on a similar topic, and they're doing that anchor. So we want to guide students through these layers, and sometimes it makes more sense when we're using it with print text, but we can guide students through these layers of what does the graph say? How does the graph work? And what does the graph mean, essentially? And taking students through these is close reading a visual. The sequencing, and we're going to have you play a little bit with sequencing some questions. According to Fisher and Fry, the sequencing needs to be based on what you want students to unfold from the text. What is the key idea that you want students to unfold? And then you sequence questions to build towards that understanding. Many times we'll see questions that appear in the order that the answers are in the text. That may be good for some purposes, but for close reading, there's no good evidence that students actually build reading skill by answering questions in the order they appear in the text. So we save that for times or for levels of students when it makes sense to the purpose that we're doing. But when close reading and building to a bigger understanding, we do want to start with general understandings, key details, questions about text structure, vocabulary, then moving into questions about purpose or point of view, then asking for some higher level inferences, and then comparing text, looking at claims, connecting to other content. And you can see that the questions get progressively higher level thinking, and the goal is to build some of the foundational pieces of understanding so that students can then attempt some of these higher level thinking questions. So the standards that we are mainly talking about today is Reading Anchor 1, which is reading closely, and Reading Anchor 2, which is determining a key idea, a central idea, details and ideas. Reading Anchor 7, which is integrating information from diverse formats. So they might be integrating information from some kind of a visual text, quantitative information, photographs, etc. And finally, Reading Anchor 9, which is comparing and contrasting two texts to discuss how the topic is presented similarly and differently. And this I think is always fun with my students, to look at a text and then to look at a graphic that has similar information and to talk about which one is more successful at presenting information, why choices were made to present information. And it's a really great way to use a visual and a short text.
So we are going to briefly show two more examples, a math example and an ELA example of those levels of questioning and close reading that Kristine just laid out. And you will get all of these handouts eventually. At the end, we'll give you links, and then we will make sure everything gets uploaded to Schedule so that you can access everything. But I'm going to click on this and then I'm going to walk through it. And again, it's a copy. So when you do get the link, you'll be able to have it and do what you want with it. But when we're thinking about sequencing questions, we start with this goal, like what do I want students to, what conclusion do I want them to make? Where do I want students to land? And so, for instance, if these were two different images or visuals that we have in a math class, a goal could be to develop a student-generated working definition for surface area. So making sense of that concept of what is surface area, can I come up with a definition? And so in this document, there are questions, and again, I will go through this briefly, but you will get this to be able to read it more closely later. But in this first layer of like, what do you see? What do we see in each picture? What part of the fruit is in image A? What part of the fruit is not in image A? And so getting, having students really look at what's there. The how does it work section. It could be, okay, if someone didn't know the difference between those two parts, how would you explain that to them? How would you explain each of those parts, the fruit, the peel, and what's happening? And then what does it mean? Maybe showing an abstract image of a sphere, saying a teacher made this image to help their students understand surface area. So kind of leading with that. And then bringing it beyond an orange. What part of an apple would represent surface area, do you think? What a part of a coconut? A watermelon? What about a balloon or a soccer ball or a football? Pointing out things don't have to be round to have surface area, right? What about a can of food? What part is that surface? If in image A, a teacher created this image to show what surface area means. So then asking, okay, how might you explain surface area to a student who missed class today? So kind of guiding students to be able to come up with a definition of surface area. It's very similar pictures, but maybe instead of the definition, maybe you have the goal of, let's make sense of the formula, right? Why is pi r squared in it? What's happening? And so hopefully then being able to recognize that the surface area of a sphere contains the formula for the area of a circle. So connecting these two. And then again, another just example of potential questions from each of those layers to kind of sequence and help lead students to those aha moments. Just starting off, what do you notice? Write down everything you see. But then some questions about how it works. And I won't read all of them, but thinking about, okay, what are the similarities between those two pictures, those two images? How do you think the circles on the paper relate to the orange, and just so forth? Just kind of how does this work? And then what does this mean? Imagine we use this ball to make circles. If we cut the ball up, how many circles might we fill? If we got another fruit, I skipped one. If we got another fruit, traced it and peeled it and put its outsides into the circles we made, about how many circles might we fill up? So the area of a sphere, or the surface area of a sphere, is 4 pi r squared. So this idea of like 4 circles and helping students see that and making sense of, wow, it's the area of a circle, but 4 times, and that's going to give me the surface area of a sphere. So this can work in math, right? With deriving formulas or understanding formulas or definitions and leading students. So you will get this example. And this is courtesy of Abby Rosa. She really created this, and I thank her for that. Another example that Kristine will walk through is an ELA example, starting with different visuals. Again, just to see it from a different place. Kristine, are you able to talk through this one?
Yes. And part of me is like, because the creator of this wonderful example,
I know, right?
and she used it in with her students, is our co-host today, Liddy Rich, and we really appreciate that. The reason I love this is because this gets students looking at different ways, and this isn't necessarily all that Liddy intended. She had questions to go with it, but the idea of looking at different ways of presenting the same information and why the writer made choices and how those choices, especially how the text works, really can impact the meaning that we make from the visual. So the first visual here, if you go just to the map one, this is Electoral College Map. This was during the previous election to show the electoral votes that President Biden received and the total votes that former President Trump received in electoral votes. And this is a very typical chart, I think, that we see or map where you have the states, and the states, have colors, and there's a legend on the side, and we can look and see extra information about the voting. But then what Liddy did is she actually brought in another text, and that's map 2. And this is the same information, but represented in a very different way. And here we see, instead of the states, the focus is on these squares and what the squares represent. And what stands out? I mean, what stands out to me is I can really, instead of just knowing or seeing a color on a state, getting a sense of how many votes, states actually have based on the number of squares. And I know that, and I am going to ask Liddy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could just take a moment to explain how you started. You originally did the activity with the top map, and then you decided it could have gone, maybe better, and you decided to add another visual.
Sure. Yeah, I used both of these maps soon after the election, and my students were totally confused. I teach a English language learner class, intermediate level. And so a little later, when we were reading about the Electoral College, then I thought I want to try this one more time. And so I came up, I tried to figure out, well, what are the goals here? And the goals are really about understanding how the Electoral College, that each state gets the number of votes based on the population, and how can we see that? So I built the questions trying to help my students find that information, to try and help them understand how the Electoral College works, because the map, the other map that has all that red area, it's really confusing. How did Biden win if there's all of that red area in map 1? So that's where I started. And you have the questions there too, because
yeah. I love what you did. I love that you reflected on your first try, and rather than what I've done in the past, sometimes it's just like, oh, I'm just done, I'm not, that whole lesson, whatever. But realizing, no, the core of the lesson is something good. I just need to keep trying to find a way to tweak it. So here we see the questions. Thank you so much, Liddy. I can't tell you much about these maps. What does the text say? So just looking at, what does the blue mean? What does the red mean? What do the shapes show? What do the colors mean? What does it say? That's the detail questions. How does it work? So, how are the states represented the same and different looking at the two maps? And then looking at, some more of, looking at the squares and looking at the legends, and again, seeing how the visual works with the information provided. And then what does it mean? This conclusion, we save the inferencing question here. What can you conclude about the population of North Dakota? And it's so visual on the second map. And I love this question, because this would be really a summative question. One person named this set of maps, land doesn't vote, people do. Do you think that is a good title? Why or why not? And I think to lead with a question like that would be very difficult for students. But to do the work here of building up and looking at what it means, or what it says, how it works, they're in a much better position to answer a question like this, or discuss the answer to a question like this with a classmate. And so this is kind of the building up and hitting on some of these spaces.
So we are going to set up what these breakout groups are going to look like. You got to see a couple different examples of sequencing questions through those three different layers, kind of leading to a goal, a summative prompt, a main understanding that we want students to land on. So we're going to take a little bit of time, quickly set up these breakout groups, and then we're going to put you in groups of 4 people. That will work, and I have enough space then for everyone on the Jamboard. So we'll have groups of 4. Let me make sure with the count. Yep, groups of 4. And you will get to practice sequencing. But first, you already had the visual of those 4 different cities and the bus ridership. So that is going to come back, and then adding this text. So with the text and with the graph, kind of those 2 texts together, sequencing questions to help lead to a summative prompt. Kristine, do you want to say any more about the overall goal before we get into the nitty-gritty?
For a second, I adapted this text from the New York Times. It is at a higher level. I would use this with my high intermediate, low ASE, and adding a bit of text that has some of the same information purposely, and then some different information. You can add much shorter text to something to kind of give that kind of comparison between 2 texts. And so I had an idea in my mind of what I wanted students, an understanding I wanted them to come to. And if you go to the next slide, this is actually in the document, correct, Lindsey?
Mm-hmm.
Or Jamboard. So the goal is, what did I want students to ultimately answer from working with the text, with the graph that shows the falling bus ridership, and then this short text that I wrote. And the summative prompt that I wanted, the takeaway I wanted students to have is, discuss which causes of low ridership from the text you think were magnified. I had magnified because magnified happened to be one of our academic vocabulary words. Additionally, based on your analysis of the text and graph, how would you sketch the graph for the next 3 years? That was an addition that Lindsey made. Now, this is something that my students, even my high AS students might struggle with. And that's why I wanted to build up some knowledge in order to give them more to talk about and more to write about and a greater understanding. And this is a big summative prompt. You can do this with low levels, and the questions may look very different than what you're about to see. AS, adult secondary. So we have low adult secondary and high adult secondary. So high adult secondary would be the students who are ready to take the GED. But you may have questions like, what is the graph about? Which word, or what does the word mean? What is the title? Where can you find certain information? If you're writing about how does the character feel, may not be with the visual necessarily. What is the chart about? What does the writer think? What is the same in text 1 and text 2? One of the great things about working with visuals and hitting that the middle part about craft and structure is many of our students don't realize that visuals, they do with pictures, but not with charts and graphs always, that visual information is presented with a point of view. And that point of view is important. And I used to never ask questions related to point of view about visuals beyond like a painting or a picture, a photograph. But now just the data is presented in a point of view. So this is a good reminder that we really want to hit those levels, those 3 levels when students are doing a close reading.
So in your breakout groups, you'll have 3 other people, so big groups of 4. When you open a Jamboard, we'll put this in the chat in a moment. You're going to see this as the first screen. So here's the text. Up here on this arrow where my mouse is, you can go to the next screen and you will see the graph and the summative prompt. Then on screen 3, this is just a reminder of the directions. And so here are the directions. Find your breakout room number on the following screens. So when you go to the breakout room, it'll say joining room 2 or joining room 5, and it will also be on the top left of your screen, I believe. But then you will go and find the pink 1 or 2 or whatever your number is, okay? And then as a group, sequence the questions on the following page in terms of those 3 layers of close reading. Which questions do I think really get at what the text says? What about how the text works? And then what does the text mean? Like how would I sequence those, keeping this summative prompt in mind? And so all you'll have to do is just drag and drop and rearrange as you are talking in your groups on where, oh, that one got hidden, on what order you think is best. You may not finish this, that is okay. Just pay attention to the process that you start and that the thinking process that you are working through as you're trying to make decisions. So I will put 3 links in the chat. And if you look at the chat, you will see there are 3 links. One says Jamboard groups 1 through 5, one says 6 through 10, and one says 11 through 15. This is because there is a limit at how many people can be in a Jamboard at the same time, but they're all the same. So pay attention to your group number and then click on whichever Jamboard matches your group number. We will take 8 minutes with a 2-minute countdown. You can stay in we will take 7 minutes. Can we change the time, Carla, or is that going to be a problem?
Nope, no problem.
Okay, let's do 7 minutes with a 1-minute countdown, and then we'll come back and we'll have a few minutes left to wrap up.
Okay.
And again, just start.
So you may not complete,
Yeah.
but maybe you can get one of the categories, select about what does the text say.
And then I'm not seeing breakout rooms 1 through 5 in the chat. Maybe it's just me, but I'm just seeing breakout room activity group 6 through 10 and 11 through 15.
Okay, I will put that back in here. And again, if you already clicked, you might not be in that room, but this is now in the chat. So whatever room you are in just like 10 seconds, then that is the Jamboard you will want to go to.
Okay, I'll be opening up the rooms.
A recommended sequence with a recommended sequence of questions. So here is the all that same information with a recommended sequence of questions. You may decide to switch around a few, but I encourage you to keep that Jamboard up and kind of try it on your own before looking at that doc that I just put in the chat. Kristine, do you want to take us home? Oh, you're on mute.
45 minutes is a bit insane. But just quickly, the idea here is we often think with a close reading in terms of the 3 categories of what does the text say, how does the text work, and what does the text mean. We often don't get into the how does the text work part. And so with visuals, we do want to do that because visual data is all over the standards, and it's something our students see. It's something that our students have to deal with on a daily basis. And we want them to develop some skills and ways of thinking about visual information that maybe we haven't done in the past.
Just an announcement. I'm the numeracy coordinator, and I can't let you go without telling you that Math Institute is coming up this next month, September 24th. It's an all-day event, but it's virtual and it's free. And we're going to be focusing on coherence. And so I'm very excited about this, talking about, okay, how are these high-level standards that students are wanting to or needing to get to master, to pass GED tests, et cetera. Where does that thinking start in some of the lower levels of math? And we're gonna talk about that and dive into that. If you have any takeaways from this session that you want to throw in the chat, I see some things coming in. Please do. If you have questions, we can stick around for a couple minutes. I know this was like drinking from a fire hose. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming. And we will put all of these resources on Sketch, so you will be able to find them there.